Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Where is it? Where is it? Izuku muttered to himself as he looked around campus. His classmates were following him as they thought he'd already know where it was located. But they didn't have to go very much farther as they all found All Might standing in front of the building they were looking for. The hero was in his Silver Age costume as he smiled down at them before he went over the rules and regulations for the battle training regimen. He spoke about how the teams will be split up between two different people who have to be chosen at random. When Ida asked why the randomness, Izuku piped up stating that in a real-life situation a hero couldn't rely on those they know about. In a real-life situation, they had to rely on those around them for the situation they will be taking part in. With those words stated, Ida went back into listening as the class watched All Might begin their lesson with a small textbook for dummies. I never thought that All Might would be bad at teaching students. Did he even learn how to become a teacher before this? Izuku thought to himself. All Might is pretty awkward, isn't he? A girl asked from his left. You could say that again. What's your name again? Sorry, I was distracted the entire day yesterday, Izuku said, before questioning the girl. Oh, sorry. My name is Uraraka Ochako. Nice to meet you. The girl, Uraraka, said happily. The name is Midoriya Izuku, and I apologize if I never remembered your name yesterday. A lot of things were going through my mind, Izuku said, as the girl shook her head. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I just can't believe that All Might is this awkward when it comes to teaching. The girl giggled. Yeah, but I think that this would definitely be something he'd never done before. Izuku chuckled. Before long, the hero had chosen who would be on the same teams as well as those who would go against another team for the exercise. As fate willed it upon Izuku, he was teamed up with a girl who was only wearing a pair of gloves and boots. From how the girl clearly exaggerated her movements, he guessed it was her way of making sure that she was seen by their peers. Izuku introduced himself to the girl as she had done the same, giving him the name Hagakure Toru. And with the two of them on a team, Izuku came up with a plan in order to take on their opponents from Team F. This might prove to be a challenge. Izuku thought to himself as he looked at the yellow suit wearing student and the boy with spiky red hair. Over time, the class would watch over the battle trials on the teams that went before Izuku's team overall. And Izuku was surprised that some of them had so much power and weren't really flaunting it. But Izuku didn't really like what Todoroki did to an entire building for their training exercise. As Izuku and Toru had walked through the building for their turn on the whole battle training lesson, Izuku was coming up with plans on the fly. He knew that his time in this battle trial was going to only be around 5 minutes for a plan, but that meant he had a total of 20 minutes in order to make a plan and set up traps. Looking at his companion, he watched as they swung their gloves around in the air as they happily strode next to him as he held the weapon. So what do you think we should do? I am going to be rather honest and say that I'm not very bright when it comes to intelligence, Hagakure said, as she moved an arm to rub her neck. Don't worry about making a plan. That is what I am currently doing. We're up against two people with strength-enhancing quirks, and from what I can see, we only have an invisibility quirk and no quirk, Izuku said, descending into his muttering. Well, I can easily see that, but is there a reason as to why you're fighting as a hero student? Hagakure asked, intrigued. I've always wanted to become a hero like All Might, just saving people with a smile and allowing the civilians I save to feel safe in my presence alone. As if just hearing my name will instill fear into the villains who are causing chaos and destruction, Izuku said, as Hagakure nodded. Yeah, I like that kind of thinking. Saving people is the highest priority after all. Hagakure happily bounced on her foot. Well, in order to win this exercise, we need to become the villains for this battle training, Izuku said, as the girl nodded. Right, she said, pumping a glove. All right, so this is the plan. Izuku spoke as he relayed the plan to Hagakure. Are you sure this will really work? She questioned, as Izuku nodded. Sure am. They will be searching the lower floors first. So if we actually start patrolling on the lower floors, they might think that it's there and spend most of their time there. I will be the one patrolling down there since I am the faster on between both of us. No offense, Izuku said, as Hagakure shook her head. I know, I'm more fit for stealth anyway, she said, as Izuku nodded. Well, I am going to have you bring the bomb to the roof of the building, and I will make sure that they stay on the lower floors before even thinking about looking on the higher floors. Izuku said, as Hagakure nodded. On the outside of the building, the two strength-enhancing students were looking at one another as they smirked to each other. This would be incredibly easy. All they really needed to do was overpower one of them and figure out where the second one is, and they were golden. And once the trial was called on to begin, the two entered the building to find Izuku already coming around the corner and immediately rushing away. The two boys gave chase immediately as the young man led them all through the corridors of the halls. Eventually, he managed to find a very large room to enter, and he'd only have a small amount of time before deploying his weapons. He immediately threw out a few smoke bombs so that the room would be entirely filled with smoke. It wouldn't hurt anyone, just burn their eyes a little bit and cause some light coughing. But Izuku wasn't done there. As soon as he had watched the smoke cover the room, he threw out a bunch of marbles to catch the heroes off guard. Once that was completed, he placed some reverse sticky tape on the walls that would give him enough time to wrap the heroes in capture tape. He heard the door be slammed open as Izuku muttered to himself. "All Might." Izuku whispered, as the man answered. "Yes, young Midoriya?" The man questioned. "This is Bravo 6, going dark." Izuku muttered before the lights in the building cut off. All Might immediately knew that this boy was indeed very crafty as he cut the power to the entire building. Thankfully, it didn't cut power to the cameras so they could see what was happening, but they all noticed something odd about Midoriya's costume. The area where his eyes were located on the camera was shown to shine for a brief moment before disappearing. "All Might, sir, what was that shown on the camera?" Uraraka questioned concerned. "That was young Midoriya's costume activating night vision, and he may or may not have given me a reference to a very old game." All Might said, chuckling. "What was the reference?" The ponytail-haired girl questioned with a confused expression. "Bravo 6 going dark." All Might said, giggling. "I'm sorry, but is that supposed to reference something?" Another student asked. "You are all worried about a video game right now when you should be focusing on the battle trial." All Might said, bringing the students' attention to the cameras. Izuku pushed through the smoke as he brought up his heat vision goggles and his hood. He saw the body type of Kirishima moving through the room as he let out a yelp. As he slipped onto the marbles he let out earlier. He slid into a wall where he felt himself get stuck to something as he struggled to pull himself off the wall. Izuku took this moment to land a punch on the boy as he caused the boy to spit out some saliva from the harsh punch to the face. Izuku then wrapped the boy's arm in the capture tape before pulling him from the wall and pinning him to the ground, wrapping the tape around his body once more. "Sorry, Kirishima-kun, I just needed to get you out before the yellow suit-wearing hero makes it to the bomb," Izuku said as he rushed off. "Young Kirishima has been captured. There are 12 minutes left." All Might's voice rang out. 12 minutes, huh? I guess I can move a bit slower in order to preserve stamina." Izuku muttered to himself as he rushed off. Near the roof, the yellow suit-wearing student had been looking around the 5th floor for the bomb to no avail. He knew that they wouldn't put it on the higher floors because that would take too much time to move. So he was currently going to head from top to bottom as he soon turned around the corner with 8 minutes left on the clock. And he was immediately clotheslined as he fell onto his back with Izuku rushing towards him. Taking his sugar cubes and gulping them down, he increased in both size and strength. The two rushed at one another attempting to exchange blows, or for Izuku survive until the boy ran out of steam. He'd seen what the boy could do in the quirk apprehension tests, and needless to say the fact that the boy seemed to run out of steam when he used too much sugar was something he needed to abuse. Dodging the attacks, the other boy decided to talk to him whilst in the middle of a fight for who would win the exercise. "What happened to Kirishima?" he called out, throwing a wild haymaker. "He's been captured already. I defeated him pretty quickly, by the way. I think I can do the same to you." Izuku retorted with a chuckle. "Well, I won't be backing down." "Did he go down swinging?" he asked, as Izuku shook his head. "I took him by surprise. He said I was unmanly for that decision, but realized that since I'm quirkless, I need to fight dirty. Like right now," Izuku said, before throwing some dirt into the taller boy's eyes. "Jaya, my eyes," the boy called out before feeling a punch on his gut, forcing him to swing an arm outward. And in an impressive display of acrobatics, Izuku grabbed onto the arm, swung around the taller boy's body, and then wrapped his legs around the taller boy's neck. He squeezed them as tight as he could as the boy started to choke on the air that was pushed out of his mouth. Pulling backwards, Izuku forced the two of them to land on the ground just as Hagakure came around the corner. She watched as Izuku held down the taller boy with just his thighs, and she muttered something about stealing Mirko's move before wrapping the taller boy in her capture tape. Villain team wins. You can stop choking Sato-kun Midoriya. All Might's voice called out, as Izuku stopped. Sorry, Sato-kun. I needed to keep you immobilized so that Hagakure-chan could capture you. Izuku said, holding a hand out. Don't worry about that, man. You just gave me a good beating. Not playing fair is something that we as heroes need to do more of. We can't always fight to the death with honor. We have people to protect, and I can understand that. Sato said, waving him off. Well, let's head over to the viewing room and hear what All Might has to say then. Huh? Izuku questioned as the taller boy chuckled and walked with the two. Entering the viewing room about 30 seconds later, they all waited for All Might to speak, which is what he did. Can any of you tell me what each team did right and wrong? All Might asked. I can, sir. Yaoyorozu Momo called out. All right, can you tell me what team I did right? All Might questioned. Team, I had no visible flaws in their strategy aside from Midoriya-kun taking all the fighting as Hagakure waited until the end before acting on their strategy. Hagakure-san would have been the better choice for patrolling since the heroes wouldn't be able to see her unless they heard her movement. Midoriya-kun should have stayed with the bomb because of the fact that he didn't have anything aside from weaponry to fall back on. If Kirishima-kun hadn't entered the room where he was within, he would have used all those weaponry for nothing. As for Team F, they were working well together except they never really made a plan, just went to overwhelm whoever they were going to fight with brute force. Yaoyorozu said, finishing her scrutinizing opinion with a huff. Well, that was good and all, but I was asking for who the MVP should be. All Might said, as the young woman blushed slightly. I apologize, the MVP should be Midoriya then, she said, as Izuku shook his head at how serious she was. With that all said and done, All Might bade the class farewell as he rushed out of the room like a man on a mission. Walking away from the room, Izuku began his long trek back towards the changing room so that he could get out of his hero costume. He was followed by two people as he was making his way to the support department first. He liked his marble idea that Hatsum gave him, but it was too time-consuming to collect it all after using them. So as he walked over there, he found himself being followed by his teammate for the exercise Hagakure. What are you doing following me? Izuku asked, as the girl shuffled slightly as they walked. Oh, just following you to the support department, she said as Izuku sighed. Is there a specific reason as to why you are heading there? I'm heading there to take away the marbles thing for my weaponry, Izuku said, as the girl nodded. I just realized in our battle training that I might need a bit more protection than some gloves and boots, Hagakure said, as Izuku chuckled. Yeah, running around naked would do that to someone, Izuku said, as Hagakure bounced slightly behind him. Well, you seem like the guy who would know about hero costumes. What would you have me do? She asked. Well, firstly, I would have preferred if you went to change into your normal school uniform, then came back here to meet up with me and Hatsum-san, as she's the one who supplied me with my weapons as well as gear, Izuku said, as the girl let out a sad whine. But I don't want to go back there alone. Mineta-kun might make a stupid comment at me again, she said as Izuku sighed. Well, at least we know he won't see you, Izuku muttered. What was that? She asked, as Izuku shook his head. The two reached the door as Izuku felt an intense feeling of déjà vu appearing in his mind before he reached for the door handle. And almost like clockwork earlier that morning, Izuku found himself being blasted away from the doorway as Hagakure screamed in horror in the background. Izuku felt something squish itself on his chest and immediately felt himself get slightly aroused before shaking it off. He reached up and helped the person on top of himself off his body as he swiped the black dust and other debris from both his and his apparent attackers' bodies. Nice to see you literally breaking the door down again with an explosion, Hatsum-san. This is Hagakure-san. She was my partner for the battle trials we had today, and I think she should get a better hero suit than what she currently has. And I need to give back the marble launcher we had for my hero suit. It's too much of a hassle to collect the marbles again, Izuku said, as Hatsum cackled. Well, that is one happy customer. And I have another one given to me by the first. This is a great week so far. Come on in, let me show you my babies, Hatsum said, pulling Hagakure inside the room with a swift yelp from the girl. I will never get used to Hatsum-san's eccentricities, Izuku thought to himself as he followed the two girls. He also asked Power Loader to get a female school uniform for Hagakure as she was essentially walking around naked, which prompted the hero to go on a tangent about perverted support companies as he walked away, presumably to the principal's office. As it would turn out, Izuku hadn't really needed to head to Nizu about his classmate's problem in terms of their hero's suit, as the animal was already berating the support companies that had allowed that to go through without even notifying him at all. Needless to say, Izuku's mission to get the principal into this whole problem was already solved, and he just decided to go pick up Hyoraku from the daycare facility within the school instead. Once there, however, he found that another of the students were looking at his kid with something akin to malice. Turning around to look at him, Izuku saw that the student in question just had a malicious sneer on their face. I would hate to see who the father of that baby is. How are they supposed to become a hero when they are supposed to be focused on school lessons and hero training? The student said, as he walked towards the door. If you have a problem with Hyoraku, then you can just leave. I didn't come here to pick up my 1-year-old son just to get into a worthless argument with someone who really can't tell when to shut up, Izuku said, before picking up his son and walking away. So you're the father of that worthless child? Why are you here instead of taking care of them at home? Isn't that what a real parent should do? The young man said, as Izuku felt a blood vessel appear on his forehead. Babargerber, Hyoraku said, as he patted Izuku's cheek. Don't worry, Hyo, I won't let this idiot get on my bad side. He's doing that himself, Izuku said, walking down the hallway. As the young man was left in the hallway, he began to rush towards Izuku in a fit of rage. Izuku, feeling the malicious feeling of eyes on his back, immediately turned around to see the punch coming for his face. Blocking it with his palm, Izuku kicked the students' feet out from under them and held their face to the ground. He watched as their eyes went from smug arrogance to complete shock and bewilderment at the situation. What is the meaning of this? He called out, voice slightly muffled. If you were trying to do something about my quirk status, then you should really try doing that to someone else. Considering I don't have a quirk to use, you really shouldn't be attacking someone who has a baby in their arms, Izuku said, leaving the student to lay there with a bewildered expression. Entering the Bakugo household, Izuku found himself sitting on the couch after he placed Hyoraku in the baby bouncy chair nearby. As the baby babbled to themselves in clear happiness and mirth, Izuku focused on doing his homework as Mitsuki watched him from afar. She smiled at how Izuku focused on his school supplies and work as he played with his son with his left hand. She was really happy at how well Izuku was showing that he was a good parent for Hyoraku since her son had tried to take him away from him. And boy, did that bring a whole new can of worms into that kind of thought process. Her son had tried to get Midoriya, someone who should have been his friend, placed in prison and take their child as his own. She really felt bad about how her son was raised, especially so since she never taught him to be rude to the Midoriya family. Every time she looked at Izuku, however, she was brought back to the time when he got her son arrested for assisted murder of the first degree. Her son could never become a hero ever again because of his record as a villain, but she never felt guilty for his actions since they were his own. Moving herself from that thought process, she went into the kitchen to begin cooking dinner, whilst Izuku focused his time on his lesson plans. And by the time dinner was prepared, Masaru and Izuku had entered the kitchen as they had Hyoraku sitting nearby. As they were silent at the table, Mitsuki let out a sigh, gaining Izuku's attention almost immediately as he kept his eyes on Hyoraku. Izuku, is there anything you want from our family? Mitsuki asked, as Izuku looked at her. What are you talking about? You're both the last remaining members of what I can feasibly call a family. My mom and dad died before I could even know about them, Bakugo. I don't want to talk about him, and you two are all I have left aside from Hyo, Izuku said, giving his child a piece of Cheerios. What is there you are specifically wanting from us? I know that Katsuki really made your life hell from what you stated on the night you got him arrested, but I just want to know, Mitsuki said, a stray tear falling from her eye. I don't want anything aside the fact that Hyoraku needs a place to stay. When I become a hero, I will be able to take care of both of us on my own. I'm causing some problems for you, aren't I? Izuku asked with a sad sigh. No, you're not causing issues. I just wanted to know your plans is all, Mitsuki said, as Izuku shook his head. I know that whenever you look at me and Hyo that I remind you of what happened to Katsuki. If you don't want me living here with you, I can move out and live somewhere else, Izuku said, as Mitsuki looked at Masaru. What makes you think that we don't want you here? Masaru asked, concerned. The look that Annie gave me earlier, Uncle. She looked at me as if I was something she should hate, not love at all. I came here and your son arrested after all. It just hasn't settled in for her even though it's been about a year. Izuku said, as he stood up. I really don't feel about you like that, Izuku. Mitsuki said, as Izuku stared at her with less emotion than earlier. Auntie, I know that you love me like your second son, but the fact of the matter is you still look at me like that. I know that I'm not welcome here from your actions alone. I will search for a new place tomorrow. End of discussion. Izuku said, before tending to his son. And over the next few days within the Bakugo household, Izuku had spent his time looking for apartments closer to UA, but at the same time not expensive. He found some apartments that are cheap, but they cost money to live there, and that is money he doesn't even have since he doesn't even have a job. Shaking his head, he clicked on the apartment he wants and looked at Masaru, who was sitting on the couch nearby. Izuku let out a sigh as he gained the attention of Masaru, with the boy's sigh becoming too loud to ignore. Is there something wrong, Izuku? Masaru asked. I don't have enough money to get this apartment. I'd have to get a side job at a place nearby the apartment and the school itself in order to pay for it. Izuku said, moving a hand through his hair. They never did say that taking care of children were a cheap thing. Masaru said, with a slight chuckle. I know, it's really hard without Kori. She would have been able to take care of Hyoriku whilst I was at UA. But now that she's gone, I don't know what to do. Izuku said, as a small tear fell from his eyes at the memory. Hey, how about this? Me and your aunt could use some of the money we have stashed away and pay for your time there. Masaru asked, as Izuku looked at him. I couldn't do that. You were going to use that for Kabukugo. Izuku said, as Masaru noticed the slip-up. You were about to call him Kaken, were you? He asked, as Izuku nodded with a sigh. Don't worry about Katsuki. He made his decision the moment he began bullying and abusing you. You're not going to be at fault for placing Katsuki in his situation right now. He was there when that boy killed your girlfriend. That makes him an accessory to murder, something he lied about in court, by the way. Masaru said, as Izuku nodded. Is it bad that I feel guilty for taking his chance to become a hero away? Izuku asked, as Masaru stared at him confused. Why should you be guilty for that? He took his chance away the moment he caused you so much harm over the last 10 years. Masaru questioned. It's just that. I remember a time when we both were going to become the #1 hero together. And now that he's gone, he blames me most likely for his chance at becoming a hero being taken away. Izuku said, as Masaru nodded. He'd probably blame you for that, but the time in prison he will have will change that hopefully. Unless he decides to become a villain, which is not something he would be willing to do. Masaru said. The two remained silent before Masaru stood up and walked over to sit next to Izuku and a sleeping Hyoriku. Looking over the computer that Izuku was using, they both talked about which apartments as a full week since the battle training happened. Izuku was back in class as he was looking over his school supplies for whatever he needed for homeroom. As he stayed quiet in his seat, Hagakure had walked over to him and thanked him for having Principal Nizu take care of the support company, for having her costume just be boots and gloves. As it turned out, it was Deternat Industries who had made the costume for most of the hero students. Soon enough, the teacher entered the room with his broody aura before telling the class that they'd need to make one of themselves the class representative. As the class were roaring with excitement about who should be the representative of their class, Izuku stayed quiet. He knew that this job would only add more things on top of what he needed to do as a student here, and he would not take the job. And when it came time to vote, based on Ida's decision on the matter, Yaoyorozu Momo and himself were chosen as the representatives. He was really surprised with how he was chosen as the vice representative as he looked at the teacher. Am I allowed to just hand my position over to someone else? Izuku questioned, as Aizawa stared at him. Is there a reason as to why you're asking this illogical question? Aizawa asked, as Izuku nodded. I have a kid, school lessons as well as many other things as a hero course student to do. I don't simply have the time to be the vice representative of this class as well, sir. Izuku said, as Aizawa glared at him harder. Then make the time. You shouldn't have a kid if you were hoping to become a hero. The man said, as the class gasped. Are you telling me that I shouldn't even have a kid, sir? Izuku asked, his eyes covered by his hair. Being around 15 years of age and being a father at the same time? That is highly illogical. Aizawa said, standing in front of Izuku. Well, sorry for being an idiot. As a 14-year-old child, I wasn't able to know whether my girlfriend at the time was on the pill. Izuku said, as Aizawa glared harshly at him. You're not giving up the position. Make the time to be the representative of your class, or give your child up to the Child Protective Services. It's clearly the better choice right now, Aizawa said, walking out of the classroom. The entire classroom was quiet as Izuku just stood there. He was projecting an entirely different aura now that the teacher was gone. His eyes were what scared most of the class, aside from Todoroki in the back as Izuku's eyes were bloodshot. But he had veins surrounding the entirety of his face as his anger was slowly building up to the point he might explode on someone if they're not careful. For the rest of the day, the teachers as well as other students around the school steered away from Izuku, as the boy was left to stew on the words of his homeroom teacher. By the time he was nearing the final class of the day, Izuku was finally approached by someone who was going to verbally attack him at the worst possible time. Izuku could hear the sounds of students telling the person glaring at his head with malicious intent to not go near him, but the student didn't listen. And that was when Izuku felt something hit the back of his head, and he felt something wet fall through his school uniform. His eye twitched as he slowly turned around to look at the offending person to see a blonde boy from the other day that he'd taken down without much effort. Well, look who it is. The worthless Class 1A student I met last week. Something wrong? The boy mocked. I am having a perfectly fine day. Mind telling me your name? Izuku asked, his voice calm but an undertone of malice. Monoma Nito, and I am here to make sure that you aren't filling those Class 1A goons with your lies about Class 1B. Monoma said, as Izuku let out a confused sound. What in the world are you talking about? Izuku asked, as Monoma looked at him hatefully. You know what I mean, Class 1A are the more popular of the classes. And I still don't think you should be bringing a child to a school for hero students. Monoma said, as everyone in the lunchroom was quiet. Inhales breath Monoma-kun. Are you sure that this is really the best time to be talking to me? Izuku asked, as he glared right into the boy's blue eyes. What are you talking about? This sounds like the perfect time, the boy said, as everyone watched Izuku stand up. The boy was still 5 feet 5 inches, and Monoma was slightly taller than him by 2 inches. Just because Monoma was slightly taller than him didn't mean that Izuku was exactly threatened by him. Taking a deep breath, Izuku just turned around to walk away before the boy spoke again, causing his face to scrunch up in fury. I'd hate to be the woman who actually had a child with you. If you are this submissive, that means that you are weak, the boy said, as Izuku immediately felt memories of Kori lying on the ground dead flow through his mind. Shut up, Izuku muttered quietly. I'm sorry, but can you speak up? Monoma mocked loudly. I said, shut up, Izuku said, glaring at Monoma with the intent to kill. Who are you to tell me what to do? Monoma said, as he tapped another student's arm and activating a quirk. By the time things were slowly getting hostile, one of the students had left quickly to get a teacher, feeling as though a fight was about to happen soon. And they'd be right, as Izuku slowly turned around with murder on his mind as he slowly took a deep breath in and walked back to Monoma, who was casually glaring at him with a smug expression. Monoma, I think you should really apologize, an orange-haired girl said, as Izuku slowly walked towards their group with a very hateful glare. Why should I apologize to someone who utterly humiliated me a week ago? If anything, he should apologize to me, Monoma said, as he looked the young woman's way before feeling like he should dodge. Monoma, you are seriously pissing him off, the young woman said, as Izuku finally stood in front of the slightly taller boy. Oh yeah? And what is he going to do about it? Monoma sneered as he glared into Izuku's hate-filled eyes. Before anything could happen, the teacher was entering the room with a very concerned expression on their face when they saw Monoma raise his hand. Moving faster than the boy and the teacher could react, Izuku slammed a fist into Monoma's face, breaking his nose and knocking him off his feet. He stood there glaring at the boy as he yelped out of pain and surprise at the quick strike to his face. Izuku just stood there without moving further, hoping that this will give the boy the message of not pissing him off further. When the teacher arrived on the scene, Izuku turned around and walked away from the spot as they looked over Monoma. Try and hit me without having the element of surprise, Beach. Monoma called out to Izuku. I was right in front of you, Monoma. If you can't predict where I will punch you, how are you going to take down a villain? Izuku said, leaving the room in an angry way. Can we get Recovery Girl into the lunchroom stat? We have a student with a broken nose, the teacher said, as Izuku continued to walk through the halls. By the time Izuku was all on his own, he exited the school building and walked towards the forest nearby. As soon as he entered the forest, he found a tree to begin taking his anger out on as he began to punch it faster and harder than ever before in his life. Each time he punched the strong bark of the tree, his hand would hurt from the sting of flesh hitting wood. But eventually, he broke the bark off the tree and his fists were slowly becoming bloody from each strike. He kept going like this as he kept getting images of Corey lying on the ground as the two bastards who kept her away from their baby kept playing in his mind. How the boy with the knife stabbed his girlfriend through her chest with said weapon, and Izuku held her in his arms as he cried out in agony. Each strike became harder and harder as Izuku started to voice his frustrations as he let out guttural screams of anger and fury. Because of Bakugo holding back his anger and fury by having Izuku be completely fearful of him for the last 10 years, and Corey coming into his life and bringing some kind of happiness to it, caused Izuku to slowly lose the fear of Bakugo at all in his life and allowed him to have the confidence to let his anger out on him. But he had never let his anger out on a person before. Just in training did he let his anger out. He was in the forest near the school for about 20 minutes of nonstop punching a tree when he was finally pulled away from it. His voice was hoarse, and his arms were trembling with the pain in his hands, but at the same time the pain of the memory of Corey flashing in his mind again. He attempted to break free of the arms around him as he simply just cried. He felt the arms around him hold him there until he just couldn't keep struggling against them before he fell to his knees. Once his session of getting his anger out of his system, as well as overflowing sadness underneath the surface of his mask of indifference, he finally took a look at who had come out here. And he was genuinely surprised to see that it was his homeroom teacher just staring at him with some slight sense of shock from how wide his eyes were. "I guess you're going to expel me?" Izuku asked, voice hoarse but his tone showing guilt. "No. The students in the cafeteria had mentioned that you were goaded into attacking him. You were holding back so much until the boy called you out when you were walking away," Aizawa said as he sat down next to him. "But didn't I attack another student?" Izuku asked, looking at the man. "You were provoked into the incident, and you were shown trying to walk away from the boy before you retaliated. It is illogical to punish the student in the right aside from the one in the wrong. You are still going into detention for harming another student, but it is a lot more lenient," Aizawa said as he looked down at Izuku. "I've never been treated the way you are right now," Izuku bluntly said as Aizawa nodded. "It hurts to be treated worse than anyone else in your life, and to have everyone helping you out confuses you," Aizawa stated, with a little more meaning to that. "Yeah, I've lived my life knowing that I can't trust people, because of how they immediately turn behind my back and attack me when I'm weak. But to be treated with such care, it reminds me about my mom. Before she died," Izuku said, as a small memory of her making his favorite food katsudan when he had a bad day of school. "What was your school life before UA?" Aizawa asked. "I'd rather not talk about it," Izuku said, looking away. "I won't ask you to tell me, but I will expect you to inform me about it at some point in the future," Aizawa said, as he stood up and began to walk away. "Do the teachers here really care about the Quirkless?" Izuku asked, as he walked next to Aizawa. "I don't know. All I do know is that I don't want you to think that I don't like you and your kid. Just make sure to be the best hero that you can be for the kid. They will look to you for everything. And you need to make sure that you are there for that," Aizawa said, walking away. Izuku stayed quiet on the way back to class. Izuku walked through the classroom doors as he moved towards his seat the next morning. He had not wanted to talk to anyone in his classroom about whatever happened in the cafeteria the previous day. The simple fact that nobody was talking to him about it caused his heart to slow down in its beating pattern. He waited with the rest of the class for their teacher to come out and inform them about what their class will be for the day. Considering that it should be homeroom, the class were just expecting their teacher to just lay down and just probably diss Midoriya for him having a child in the school. When the man actually entered the classroom, they saw that he had a very cautious expression taking over his face. He let out a sigh before he spoke to the classroom, causing those who were quietly conversing with one another to silence themselves. "You stopped talking by the time I got here. That's good, but it's still not fast enough. I expect you all to be quiet before I get here. Anyway, aside from me talking trash about your inability to stay quiet, get your hero costumes on and meet me outside. We're going on a field trip," Aizawa said, as he exited the classroom after pressing a button. The class stayed in their seats for a moment before they saw Izuku gathering his hero costume case as he left the room. They all followed after him in order to not be left behind. Once outside, the class saw that their teacher was looking at a card as if it was the bane of his existence before he let out another sigh before glancing at them all. He showed it to them all as they were relatively surprised with how the card had 2 words written on it. Rescue training. Today, class, me, All Might, and another guest teacher will be teaching you all the fundamentals of rescue work, Izawa said as he stared at his students. This is what I've always wanted to be, Uraraka called out, happily bouncing. Now this is what real heroes are here for, Kirishima said as he pumped his fists. Will this be fun, Mr. Izawa? Ashido asked, concerned. It will be fun for those who take it seriously. But if you all so much as make sure that you are not listening to the orders of me, All Might, or the guest teacher, then you all will have detention, Izawa replied as the students followed him onto the bus. Sitting on the bus, Izuku kept himself at the back near Hagakure as the girl was animatedly talking to Ashido about clothing as well as hero moves. He smiled to himself as he listened in on their conversation as he merely chuckled at the 2 girls' enthusiasm about clothing styles as well as dance moves. Ashido, however, had made it a big deal that she would incorporate dance moves in her fighting style. As the bus took off, Izuku kept to himself as he listened to the class talking about their quirks as well as how they want to be viewed as a hero. As they continued to talk about one another as well as their quirks, Izuku watched as they compared their own quirks to that of others. But Yaoyorozu had then decided to bring him and his quirklessness into the equation as she stated that he got in without a quirk, meaning that anyone could enter UA without a quirk of their own and reasonably enter the hero course. As the students went further to talk about a hypothetical quirkless hero, most of them had stated that it was thought to be impossible since they'd be overlooked on the rankings. But if they thought that Izuku was becoming a hero to only be on the high ranks, he wouldn't want to be a hero in the first place. His thought process about becoming a hero was to just save people and inspire them to become heroes like he was. All right, that's enough talking. We're here, Izawa said, causing the students to stop talking and exit. Wow, this building looks really cool, Uraraka said as she gasped lightly. It's the USJ. I've only heard about this place when I was in elementary. Izuku gushed as everyone looked at him. How did you hear about this place exactly? Yaoyorozu questioned, slightly concerned. I only heard about it from older UA students as an elementary student. They were walking by me as I ran down the street, Izuku said as he walked by her. The class and Izawa made their way over to where the building was at, and they found that there was someone waiting for their arrival. If anything, it was as though they knew that Izawa was bringing his class there for a lesson, but there was a certain thing missing from this. All Might was nowhere to be seen. Not only that, but Pro Heroine 13 had shown up and spoke to the students. And Izuku had overheard that Izawa was speaking to Pro Heroine 13 about why All Might wasn't there. And for some reason the heroine had pulled up 3 fingers, and Izuku was left to wonder what she meant by that. That man is the height of irrationality. Anyway, this is going to be me and 13 for the day, I guess. All Might will probably show up near the end of class, so don't expect him to arrive early, Izawa said as he led the class towards the USJ's door. 13 took over the tour of the place as she had made sure that everyone knew that with them using their quirks, there was a very high likelihood of them killing someone. When that was stated, everyone went quiet as Izuku just muttered about missing Kori. As 13 went on about what a rescue hero/heroine should do on the job is primarily rescuing people from disasters and many villain attacks. But the primary objective of being a hero/heroine was to keep the civilians safe from any and all harm that might come their way. And it moved along with her introducing the class to the building's name that she came up with when it was in construction. The name of this building is the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short, 13 said, happily as Ochako gushed about the heroine to Ida. Midoriya, do you know what we could be preparing for in this kind of rescue exercise? Hagakure questioned, looking in Izuku's general direction. Anything that ranges from monsoons, to flaming buildings, to flash floods. If anything, this is preparing us to be ready for any kind of disaster that may happen on the field of heroics, Izuku said, as the girl happily bounced along. The students walked through the entrance as they saw all the different parts of the USJ, the Flaming City, the Monsoon Zone, the Mountain Zone, and many more. And as Aizawa was preparing to begin the class, the lights in the building began to flicker and suddenly turn off. Izuku immediately entered a combat stance, pulling out his weapon that Mei had made for him earlier on that week. Pulling the titanium staff that had a portable taser inside, he glared down at the plaza, believing that to be where everything is taking place. Aizawa seemed to get what Izuku was doing before he stood in front of the class as he activated his capture gear. "What's that?" Kirishima asked, pointing at the plaza. "Get behind me. 13, protect the students," Aizawa called out, pulling his goggles downward over his eyes. "What's wrong, sensei? Isn't this part of the training?" Another student asked, concerned. "This isn't a drill. Those are real villains," Aizawa said, as a purple portal with a black interior appeared in the plaza. A hand appeared on the portal as it pulled it aside to reveal a red eye, but with a hand covering most of the face. He glared at the students of Class 1A as he pushed himself through the portal as hundreds of villains followed right after him. Looking at his surroundings, he chuckled to himself before glaring right in the direction of the students taking stock of the situation. He did notice that there was a glaring lack of all might within the students and teachers present at the USJ, causing him to begin to scratch his neck in irritation as he spoke out loud for all to hear. "Kurogiri, All Might was supposed to be here, right? I know that was what the school schedule stated," the villain asked, as the warper Kurogiri's eyes glowed. "That was what the schedule was supposed to be. But it appears as though that All Might is not present. We can continue with our mission," Kurogiri replied. "Well, I wonder if we should leave him a few presents courtesy of the League of Villains." "Do you think he might like to see a few dead children?" the villain questioned, as Izuku immediately moved to the front of his class. As fast as everything began, Aizawa moved towards the villains to intercept them, but not before giving 13 directions to get the students out of there whilst he holds them off. Izuku knew that Aizawa's hero persona was someone who relied on ambush tactics in order to take down villains, so he pushed up before his shoulder was grabbed by 13. "Aizawa-sensei, your quirk only relies on the element of surprise. It's why you were able to become a prolific underground hero. There's no way you can take them all on your own," Izuku said, concern etched into his tone. "Midoriya, even without a quirk you should know this. No hero is a one-trick pony," Aizawa replied as he took off. "Come on, Midoriya-kun, we need to leave," 13 said, as Izuku allowed himself to be pulled with her. As the students and 13 took off towards the exit of the building, Aizawa rushed towards the villains. He had to admit that he never knew that Midoriya of all people would be the student to figure out his whole hero persona. Although he had to admit that Midoriya finding out that he was Eraserhead was not something he expected. That was something he'd have to look into once this was all over. But if anything, he was preparing himself for this fight between him and the villains. They started to launch emitter-class quirks at him as he activated his own quirk, and they all fizzled out as the more combat-oriented villains called out that he can erase their quirks. As he launched himself at the villains with his capture scarf, he wrapped up a villain before swinging them around in the air, smacking them into another villain. He then threw his capture scarf at another villain before pulling himself towards them with incredible speed. He spun his body around as he did a spin kick to hit 2 villains at the same time before elbow striking another in the gut. He jumped into the air as he dodged a strike from behind as a villain had thrusted their knife in his direction. As Aizawa continued on the small fry of the villain group, he admittedly took his eye off the warping villain for just a millisecond, allowing them to escape. He clicked his tongue as he focused his time on the villains in front of himself, as only one thought came to his mind. "Please make sure that you're all ready for a fight. I can't be there to protect you all," Aizawa mentally pleaded. On the top of the steps, Izuku and the rest of his class rushed towards the exit as a portal appeared in front of their pathway. The villain stepped out of the portal as he chuckled to himself before speaking to them all. "Hello there, I am with the League of Villains, and it is our mission to bring an end to the #1 hero, All Might," Kurogiri said, as his eyes glowed ominously. "Get back, kids," 13 called out, pulling out a black hole from their suit. "A pro heroine 13, one of the better rescue heroines within the world. But my power is ultimately your immediate counter," the villain said, moving a portal behind the heroine. "Gah!" 13 screamed in agony as a portal appeared behind her, tearing into her back. As the villain took care of the heroine, he looked over at the students as he created new portals around the students as he smirked at them all under the mist. He then watched as portals had sucked into each and every portal except for a select few students. And as the remaining students glared at him with varying levels of worry as well as anger, he smirked internally as he began to think about his next choice to take down the students. Over in the forest zone, Izuku lands nearby in a tree as he suddenly feels his equilibrium fall apart as he was pushed out of the portal. He smashed through the tree before landing in a heap on the ground as he groaned in slight pain before he felt something land on his body. He heard a small eep as the person who had fallen on him had broken her fall on Izuku as he slowly got up. And seeing a pair of gloves and boots, he suddenly realized that the girl on top of him is basically naked, and he immediately stands up helping the girl up as well. "Where is everyone, Midoriya-kun?" Hagakure asked as she stood up behind him. "It appears that we're still in the USJ, so we just need to return back to the entrance. Let's head north," Izuku said as Hagakure gave a hum. The two walked through the forest before they felt the area become colder as ice covers the ground. Immediately jumping in front of Hagakure, he pushed her out of the way as a portion of his body became encased in ice. "Midoriya-kun!" Hagakure screamed. Izuku's teeth chattered as he was as still as possible in case he accidentally broke of a limb that was tethered to the ground. Hagakure was looking everywhere for the villain using an ice quirk only to find their classmate holding a mass of villains in ice. Rushing over to the young man, she had gotten his attention by telling him about how he'd accidentally encased Izuku in ice. The young stoic teen looked over his shoulder to see Izuku frozen inside the ice partly as he walked over and placed a hand over the ice. "Sorry, I had no idea you guys were here with me," he muttered. "It's fine, Todoroki-kun. Just make sure that this dude doesn't happen," Izuku said through chattering teeth. "Okay," Todoroki said as he finally released Izuku from his icy jail cell. As soon as he was freed, he walked over to the villain Todoroki was speaking to before Hagakure got his attention. Apparently, Todoroki was interrogating the villain into telling him about the villain's plans for attacking the school. And as Todoroki had continued his interrogation, Izuku and Hagakure had looked at their surroundings to find multiple villains encased in ice as well. They were only up to their necks in it, but Izuku was very glad that this wasn't what he was trapped in as he'd be getting hypothermia immediately. Once Todoroki had completed his interrogation of the villain, he returned to Izuku and Hagakure's sides as he told them the plan of the villains. If they're here to kill All Might, then that means that they have something that could possibly complete that kind of daunting task, Izuku said, as Todoroki and Hagakure stared at him. "What do you mean by that, Midoriya-kun?" Hagakure asked. "They arrived with that very muscular villain with a beak. What makes you think that super strength is all it has?" Izuku questioned as the two stared at him. "What are you implying, Midoriya?" Todoroki questioned quietly. "I'm implying that this creature of a villain has more than just one quirk," Izuku said, as the other two just stared at him in shock. As the trio had run through the remaining forest, they had met up with another of their classmates, Tokoyami, who had dealt with his small force of enemies. He had thanked them for their arrival and followed after in order to head to the exit of the USJ in order to find a way to get help. They had no idea whether or not their classmates were still inside the USJ, and for all they knew their classmates might be dead. Although for Izuku, there was only one person on his mind as he rushed through the forest. Hayoriku. He wanted to finish this whole thing so he could be back with his baby boy. Gosh, he was sounding like his mother now. "Hey Midoriya-kun, after this whole thing blows over, do you want to hang out sometime?" Hagakure asked as she jogged next to him. "Sounds like a lovely idea, Hagakure-san," Izuku said as he rushed through the forest behind Todoroki and Tokoyami. "Well, that sounds fun, but we should probably focus on our task right now," Todoroki said as he stopped behind a tree overlooking the plaza. "How do you guys think that Aizawa-sensei is doing?" Hagakure asked. "From what it appears, he's faring well against our darkened foes. But he won't last much longer as it is. From how Midoriya mentioned earlier before we were separated, he's an ambush hunter," Tokoyami said with his gothic words. Tokoyami's right. Aizawa-sensei is an ambush hunter who is also an underground hero. He doesn't specialize in group fights for long periods of time. We need to find a way to lower the burden on his back in terms of fighting the villains, Izuku said, a plan starting to form. Before they could react well to the whole battle between their teacher and the large army of villains, the flood zone had suddenly and erratically exploded in yellow electricity. The small group had watched as the waters became somewhat electrified as the villains inside had floated up to the surface. And with that, their other classmates swam over to them all with a very out-of-it Kaminari who was just saying, "Why?" over and over again. As soon as both boys were placed on the banks, they had pulled the two boys and Tsu over to themselves. Once that was done, they all thought about a plan to take the burden of fighting a very large force of enemies off their teacher's back so he could relax a bit and recover some stamina. Alright, so this is the plan. Azui, I need you to take Kaminari and Hagakure to the entrance. Todoroki-kun, Tokoyami-kun, I need you both to assist me in keeping Aizawa-sensei from being overwhelmed. Izuku said, as they all nodded. Midoriya-chan Azui stated looking at him with a serious expression. What is it? Izuku asked, a little concerned. Just call me Tsu. You've well more and earned the right to call me that, she said, taking off with Hagakure and Kaminari. With that all said and done, the small squad of students had split up in order to take the villains' attention off their fleeing classmates and to bolster the defense of their teacher. Running as fast as they could, they arrived behind their teacher as he had just taken down another villain who attacked him from the front. Izuku leaped through the air and slammed a kick into another villain's head, knocking them to the ground and gaining Aizawa's attention. As he was about to scold Izuku for coming to his rescue, a trail of ice and a black demon bird had flown past him and taken down multiple foes. What are you three doing here? You're supposed to be evacuating, Aizawa said, scolding the trio. Aizawa-sensei, as much as we would love to leave this place, the mist villain would just prevent us from leaving again. So instead, we're providing support to you until backup from the heroes at UA come and help us, Izuku said, throwing a fist at another villain who took it to the gut and coughed up saliva. Leaving you behind wouldn't really be a heroic thing to do, wouldn't it? Tokoyami questioned, as Todoroki sealed their fate. A real hero should interfere where they aren't required, no matter the cost to themselves, Todoroki said, as Aizawa just chuckled. Just make sure to keep yourself safe, Aizawa said, as the trio nodded. And quicker than most of the villains could react, the trio of students had rushed out as Aizawa focused his eyesight on the three villains in front of him who were approaching. He rushed at the trio as the light blue-haired villain had rushed at him as they both clashed with Aizawa, keeping himself out of arm's reach, but also landing good attacks on the villain group's leader. With Izuku, he had jumped into the fray of multiple villains with mutation quirks as he used his staff in order to attack each one with terrifying efficiency. He swung one end of his staff in front of himself, slamming into the body of one mutation villain, and then swung his feet out to trip another before slamming the end of his staff on their head, knocking them out. He then used the staff to leap himself into the air and land a few more blows on the remaining villains that Tokoyami and Todoroki dealt with easily. Before they turned around, they felt the presence of a new villain coming towards them. Being the first one to take notice, Izuku pushed Tokoyami out of the way of the light blue-haired villain as he rushed them. Tokoyami watched as Izuku entered combat with the light blue-haired villain before taking another villain down himself to change targets. The light blue-haired villain was very quick on his feet, as Izuku barely was able to dodge each and every attack that they threw. But he kept his eyes on the villains, arms as they swung out in desperate wide arcs, just praying to land on him. 5-finger point touch-based quirk. Very dangerous, and considering he just is trying to get his hands on me. Something very bad happens when he grabs me. Need to keep my distance, Izuku thought to himself as he continued dodging the attacks of the villain. Just stop dodging and allow me to hit you. The villain growled as Izuku pulled out his brass knuckles and staff as he countered. How about you just stop trying to grab me with those filthy hands? What are you doing with them to look like they need more lotion? Izuku retorted, causing the villain to enter a rage. Dodging the first attack, Izuku swung his staff around and slammed it on the villain's arm, causing a small crack to be heard. Not even stopping to think about breaking the villain's arm, Izuku swung his fist out to hit the villain in the head, but had to stop as a portal appeared before his fist, and he pulled back as he swung his feet out and tripped up the villain in front of himself. He then activated a component of his staff as prongs appeared from it, and a small electrical spark appeared before he slammed it into the downed villain who was attempting to get back up. As he screamed in pain as the electricity arced across his body, Tokoyami went after the mist villain and kept him busy. Just stay down, Izuku said, as he stopped shocking the villain. Never. I need to kill you all. To send a message. The villain growled, as Izuku threw his staff at the villain again. Not letting you shock me again, hero, the villain said, grabbing onto the staff. Izuku watched in fascination as his staff had begun to decay by turning into rust before becoming dust before he dropped it. He kept his brass knuckles on as he moved away from the villain as he stood back up and dusted himself off. And as the villain stared at Izuku, the young man was already into his CQC combat stance that he'd learned from Aizawa. The villain took one step as he stared at Izuku for a moment before he realized something about the boy. What is your quirk? The villain asked, scratching his neck. What's it to you? Izuku asked, back waiting for an attack. You haven't used a quirk this entire time, unless it was producing weapons from right out of your rear. The villain said, as Izuku glared at them. I don't know why you are asking me about why I am not using a quirk, especially so when I don't have one to use. Izuku retorted as he took a deep breath, closing his eyes and opening them to stare at the villain. You're quirkless? And you are holding your own against me? With that pitiful fighting style? That's surprising. The villain said, stopping his erratic scratching. Why does me being quirkless bother you so much? Want to say that I can't become a hero without a quirk? Sorry, but I've already been told as such my entire life. Izuku said, as he pulled a replacement staff out. No, just that I've never seen another of your kind in years. My sensei had a brother who used to be quirkless. The villain said, as Izuku shook his head. Are we going to continue to fight or not? Izuku asked, as the villain shook his head. I am done fighting you. But that doesn't mean that I can't call someone else to fight you. But I won't kill you. Just make sure that you won't get back up again. Nomu, the villain said, before screeching out the creature's name. Izuku felt the air swiftly flow around him as if he was in the middle of a hurricane, and as he slowly moved his eyes to look to his right, he saw a massive body filled with scars. And a fist was closing in on his face as he desperately moved his body as fast as he could to move out of the way of the incoming fist. As he leaned backwards, managing to lean back at an immediate straight line of 180 degrees, the fist blasted past his upper body. The air displacement of the attack, however, launched him into the air and tumbled across the plaza. As soon as he was on his back, he heard the telltale sound of the black creature coming towards him as he immediately stood up. But as soon as he was fully standing back up, he swung his staff around to slam its prongs into the skin of the creature as it reached for him. As the creature suddenly became enlightened by blue light-powered electricity, Izuku watched as it literally did nothing but cause the muscles of it to seize up. This allowed Izuku to climb on top of the creature as he felt as though it had some kind of absorption quirk to take hits. As soon as he was on top of the creature's shoulders, he pulled out one final weapon that he was told to use in times of crisis by his teacher. A 10-long blade was pulled from its holster on his hip as he slammed it into the brain of the creature, thinking that it'll kill it immediately. Blood squirted into his face as he waited for the creature to finish throwing its body around to get him off it as he held on for dear life. But as soon as he twisted the blade inside the monster's brain, it ceased all movement as it just suddenly leaned forward. Jumping from its head, Izuku stood back up immediately after falling on his butt and entered a combat stance. He waited for it to do something that could cause him to be shocked, but nothing happened. Letting out a sigh of relief, he heard the patter of feet coming towards him from behind as he immediately pulled out the knife from the Nomu's head and swung it behind himself. Whoever was chasing towards him had leaped back and growled ominously at him as he stared at them. The light blue-haired villain had glared harshly at him before he scowled and roared out in anger at him. How in the world did you defeat me, Nomu? All Might was supposed to be the only one who could fight it, not some quirkless wannabe hero. The villain said, as Kurogiri, the mist villain, appeared next to the villain. We need to go. The heroes will be here any second. The villain said, as Izuku put his knife in a throwing position and threw it at the two. It swung in a circular arc as it spun in the air, and once it was close enough to the villain to not be completely broken or dusted immediately. Izuku heard it sink itself into the body of the smaller villain as he let out a screech of surprise and pain, falling to the ground. With that done, the two disappeared from sight as Izuku looked over at his teacher, who was laying on the ground trembling in pain. Rushing over to him, he picked him up as softly as he could and placed him on his back before rushing up the stairs with his classmates. Climbing up the stairs, Izuku came across a scene that could be from a horror movie that he'd watched with the Bakugo family a few years back. 13's body was on the ground with signs of first aid done to her, that she would survive this attack, with a lot of scarring on her back. Looking at those who remained at the top of the stairs, he laid Aizawa on the ground next to 13 as they all immediately set about giving him first aid. It was here that the teachers had decided to break down the door and announce their presence. All Might was leading the charge as he stared at the destroyed building as well as the two teachers who were heavily injured. "I am here." All Might's voice rang out. "I have arrived. With the assistance of our teachers." Ida's voice rang out. "Spread out and save our students." "That is an order." Principal Nizu's voice called out as Izuku collapsed off his feet and on his rear. With the teachers splitting apart to take care of the villains surrounding the place, some of the other teachers looked over Izuku and his classmates who were present. They were questioned about everything, and Izuku told them about what he knew as well as what their classmates saw. Once the police arrived, they relayed the information to them as some talked to the students about this whole situation. Izuku had also watched as some of his classmates were wheeled out on stretchers as they had either broken arms or torn up bodies. They would live but have to live with the trauma of nearly dying multiple times today, but they could handle that because they were heroes in training. "Young Midoriya, I believe that I need to have a few words with you." A very familiar voice called out behind him. "All Might, what do you need from me?" Izuku asked as the man stared at him. "I need to talk to you in secret, just need to ask something of you," the hero said as Izuku followed him away. So, this was the end of part 3 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.